An old farmer gets pulled over by a state trooper. The officer lectures him on how irresponsible it is to be speeding and does everything he can to get the farmer off balance. While the trooper is filling out a form, he keeps swatting at a swarm of flies around him. The farmer asks,
"You having trouble with them circle flies, officer?"
The trooper replies, "Yeah, why do you call them circle flies?" The farmer says,
"Well, they're usually seen circling round the back end of horses."
"Oh, I see," the trooper replies. After a minute, the trooper looks up from his paperwork and says indignantly, "Wait a minute. Are you calling me a horse's ass?" The farmer says,
"Oh, no, officer. I've got too much respect for the police to do that."
"Good," the trooper says. The farmer continued,
"Hard to fool them circle flies, though."
A politician visits a primary school to speak to the children. During class, he asks the students if anyone can give him an example of a tragedy. Kevin raises his hand first and offers,
"If my best friend is playing in the street and a car comes by and kills him, that would be a tragedy."
"No," the politician says. "That would be an accident." Next, Marcy raises her hand.
"If a school bus carrying 50 children drove off a cliff, killing everyone inside, that would be a tragedy."
"I'm afraid not," explains the politician. "That is what we would call a great loss." The room is silent. None of the other children dare volunteer. "What?" asks the politician. "Isn't there anyone here who can give me an example of a tragedy?" Finally, little Johnny raises his hand.
"If an airplane carrying a politician was blown up by a bomb, that would be a tragedy."
"Marvelous!" the politician beams. "And can you tell me why that would be a tragedy?"
"Well,"
says Johnny.
"because it wouldn't be an accident, and it certainly would be no great loss."
After a long day on duty, a tired police officer returns home. Exhausted, he quietly enters the dark bedroom and strips out of his uniform, leaving it scattered on the floor. He looks for the light switch, but figures his wife is lying in bed and decides not to disturb her. Just before he's about to climb into bed, his wife speaks.
"Honey, can you run down to the corner store and buy some bread so I can make breakfast for the kids tomorrow?"
she asks. "Fine, but you should have mentioned it earlier," grumbles the man as he reluctantly puts the uniform back on. He heads to the corner store, grabs a loaf of bread, and heads to the checkout counter to pay for it. As the cashier is ringing him up, they engage in casual banter.
"Hey, Jerry,"
greets the cashier.
"how are you tonight?"
"Exhausted," replies the man. "I'm just grabbing some bread for breakfast tomorrow, then I'm going straight to bed."
"Did you get a new job?"
asks the cashier. "Nah, I still work for the police department," the man replies. "Why do you ask?"
"Well," says the cashier, "that's what I thought. But that's definitely a fireman's uniform."
Two men from a small town in Ireland were looking at a mail order catalog and admiring the pictures of the models. Patrick said to Shane,
"Have you seen the gorgeous women in this catalogue?"
Shane replied,
"Yes, I have, and aren't they all gorgeous too?" "And have you seen the price?"
Patrick exclaimed with wide eyes.
"Will you look at that? They aren't at all expensive. At this price, I'm buying."
Shane smiled and patted Patrick on the back. "Good idea, Patrick. You order one, and if she's as gorgeous as she's in the catalogue, I'll get one too." 3 weeks later, Shane asks his friend, "Did you ever receive that girl you ordered from the catalogue?" Patrick replied,
"No, I didn't, but it shouldn't be long now. She sent all her clothes yesterday."
A reporter learns of a woman who receives the highest welfare payments in town, and he is curious as to why. So he goes to the woman's house to interview her. After arriving at her house, he knocks on her door and a beautiful young woman answers. The reporter introduces himself, then asks, "How old are you, ma'am?"
27.
She replies. "And how many children do you have?" He continues.
10.
She replies. Wow, okay, that explains a lot, he says, taken aback. And what are their names? He asks.
Well, there's Bob, then there's Bob, 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 and of course Bob.
They're all named Bob? He asks, even more bewildered. What if you want them to come in from playing outside?
I just call Bob, and they all come running inside,
she explains. And if you want them to come to the table for dinner? He asks.
I just say, Bob, come eat your dinner, and they do,
she answers. But what if you want just one of them to do something? He asks.
Oh, that's easy,
she replies.
I just use their last name.
A wealthy man was having an affair with an Italian woman. One night, during one of their rendezvous, she confided in him that she was pregnant. Not wanting to ruin his reputation or his marriage, he paid her a large sum of money if she would go to Italy to have the child. If she stayed in Italy, he would also provide child support until the child turned 18. She agreed, though she wondered how he would know when the baby was born. To keep it discreet, he told her to mail him a postcard and write spaghetti on the back. He would then arrange for child support. One day, about 9 months later, he came home to his confused wife.
Honey,
she said,
you received a very strange postcard today.
Oh, just give it to me and I'll explain it later,
he replied. The wife handed the card over and watched as her husband read the card, then promptly turned white and fainted. Alarmed, she picked up the card on the floor and read aloud,
Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. 2 with meatballs, 1 without.
Deep within a forest, a little turtle is standing at the bottom of a large tree. With a deep sigh, the turtle starts to climb the tree slowly. After hours of effort, he finally reaches the top. He jumps into the air waving his front legs, then crashes heavily into the ground with a hard knock on his shell. After recovering consciousness, he starts to climb the tree again, jumps, and again crashes into the ground below. The little turtle is undeterred. He persists again and again while a couple of birds sitting at the edge of a branch nearby watch painfully. One of the birds watching shakes her head, then turns to the other bird and asks,
Honey, don't you think it's time we tell him he's adopted?
Prince was put under a spell so that he could speak only one word each year. If he didn't speak for 2 years, the following year he could speak 2 words and so on. One day, he fell in love with a beautiful lady. He refrained from speaking for 2 whole years so he could call her my darling. But then he decided he wanted to tell her I love you, so he waited 3 more years. At the end of the 5 years, he decided he wanted to also ask her, will you marry me? So he waited another 4 years. Finally, as the 9th year of silence ended, he led the lady to the most romantic place in the kingdom and said,
My darling, I love you. Will you marry me?
To this, the lady replied,
Pardon me?
A man was in New York on a business trip and decided to head to a bar for a drink. Standing outside the bar was a nun holding a tin cup. As the man threw a few bucks into her cup, the nun launched into a long tirade about the evils of alcohol. She went on and on about how alcohol was tearing apart the fabric of society, how it was the root of all the city's problems. Slightly annoyed at having to listen to the nun, the man told her,
Listen, sister, I work hard for my money, and sometimes at the end of a long day, I like a drink or 2. That doesn't make me a bad person. I have a wife I idolize and 2 wonderful kids at home. I provide for my family, I volunteer my time to several local service clubs, and I contribute regularly to various charities. Yet you stand here and condemn me just because I drank the occasional glass of scotch?
The nun was slightly taken aback and replied,
I see your point, my son, and I apologize if I offended you. But alcohol is such a powerful demon that all who consume it are doomed.
Look, there you go again,
said the man.
How can you make such a sweeping statement? Have you ever even tried alcohol?
Of course not,
gasped the nun.
The evil alcohol has never touched my lips.
The man continued,
Do you really think that one glass of booze can change you from a devout nun to some kind of evil degenerate?
Well, I really don't know,
the nun replied.
I'll tell you what,
said the man.
Come into the bar with me and I'll buy you a drink. Just one drink. I'll prove to you that evil is not inside the glass, it's inside the person.
Oh, I could never be seen going into such a den of iniquity,
replied the nun.
It's out of the question. However, your comment about evil residing in the person rather than the glass is quite intriguing. I must admit, you've aroused a curiosity in me.
Well, let's go inside and settle this then,
insisted the man.
No, my son,
said the nun.
I could never enter such a place. But how about this? Take my tin cup with you and fill it with this scotch you mentioned. Bring it out to me and I'll try it.
You're on,
said the man. The nun removed all the change and handed him the tin cup. He went into the bar and said to the bartender,
2 scotch on the rocks, and could you put one of them in this tin cup, please?
The bartender sighed and said,
Is that darn nun out there again?